creationists debating what can be the result of apparent age and what can't be. And I think, as you've demonstrated, caves, stalactites, stalagmites, limestone, we don't need an apparent age argument for these features, these realities. Another one has to do with the craters on the moon. So some say there's just too many craters on the moon to be explained in a young Earth creation timescale. And so the moon must have been created with those craters rather than occurring after creation. What are your overall thoughts on that, Mike, if you had any?
Oh, I could say a lot because I've worked on impacts,
right,
being either a cause of the flood or part of catastrophic plate tectonics. And I've come to believe, based on my study on floods of Mars, that I've come to believe the day 4 cratering hypothesis by Danny Faulkner, which says that at creation, the Earth was formed before day 4. But on day 4, God created all the other bodies of the solar system and the stars, the sun and the moon. And in the process of creating, he created out of mass that he made on day 1. And so he put the mass in the planets. And part of that was for planetesimals to still be moving around for a while and impacting the surface from day 4 onward. And so I come to believe on that. Then he believed that the big basalt areas on the moon were from the flood. I've studied Mars and written 3 papers now for the Creation Research Society Quarterly, and study the craters. I can show that the big ones formed later than a lot of the small ones, because Mars had a magnetic field and it magnetized the crust. And when an impact hits the crust that's magnetized, it destroys the magnetism. But the magnetic field is still there. It will it'll reform in the melt rock. But if the magnetic field is gone, or it won't reform. And so you have a lot of craters where you have the magnetic field that isn't affected by the cratering. But then you have some of the large ones where the magnetism was destroyed and never came back, which means it came later than the rest of the craters. Same as on the moon. So you had craters formed during creation week, day 4 cratering hypothesis, and then you had craters formed during the flood. So two cratering events. And I have a long article, over 20,000 words, that I'm going to publish on my website as soon as I get my website refurbished, and probably late summer to early fall. And I'll have a free article on impacts being a model or a submodel of the flood. And I'll talk about the day 4 cratering hypothesis and all the evidence and for that from Mars, and that applies to the moon. But we don't find these craters on the Earth because the Earth was formed before day 4, you see. And so we escaped. And so it didn't destroy any of the organisms that God had just was creating during creation week. So that's how I would explain that. And I think I have a fair amount of evidence. And I also explain the floods on Mars too, by the way.
Well, you have a whole presentation on that too, don't you?
I do. Have I given it to you before?
No, that might have to be our next one, Mike, because that sounds...
Okay, I can do that.
Let's do it right now. No, I'm just kidding.
I gave you kind of a quickie on one part of it.
Right. Sneak preview. So if I understood you correctly, and if I remember correctly too, secularists say there's maybe a million or so craters on the moon, with at least 1,000 of them just miles and miles wide, 12 miles, I think. So those are some big craters. But you said a lot of those larger ones would be formed later, after creation, with a lot of the smaller ones during creation week.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the day for creating hypothesis. And so you get a lot of the, you only have maybe about a couple thousand of over 20 kilometers in diameter or something like that. Others are pretty small, and they can form by secondary craters. When one big crater forms, it blasts up all these rocks, and they come back down forming craters. And so you usually have 1 million times as many small craters, a kilometer in diameter, maybe on that order, formed. So a lot of them can be from that mechanism of the secondary craters.
That's a great point I had not thought of. So when they say there's 1 million craters, with only 1,000 to 2,000 being really large, a large one could hit, but then pieces of rocks fly up, come back down, and make more craters.
Yes, the smaller ones.
Okay, so many craters can be due to one large one.
Yes.
Okay, well, that lessens the problem or the challenge a little bit more. That's a great point. Okay, well, I look forward to you putting out an article on that in your website. I'm just trying to almost think what someone might object to that. What if somebody said that the craters, a lot of them being formed during creation week, that would go against a very good creation?
I used that against Faulkner when I didn't believe his mechanisms. And he says, well, no, not necessarily. It might be violent, but it doesn't mean it's not against a very good creation. So he had a good point, and he persuaded me. That there's no biology on those.
There's no killing going on, right?
Yeah. So there's
Could that have been a way for God to make the moon look a little more appealing, have a little more personality to it, rather than just being this big clear rock in the sky? I'm not sure if it's happening at creation week, right?
There's a lot of spiritual reasons for a lot of this, but I'm not very philosophically or theologically minded, so a lot of this escapes me. My wife would be a lot better at it, figuring these things out than me.
But you're dealing with the science really good. I think we'll turn that last segment into a clip, since that's a topic that has invoked a lot of discussion lately. So I appreciate that, Mike.